One of the things that we always seem to get stuck on is money, right? And very often when we are stuck on it, it is because there is a lack of it. And that is one of the things that's been happening, really not just to maybe some of us personally, but across the country, really, certainly the state, municipalities trying to do more or even the same with less. And Michigan Citizen Action has taken note of that. Linda Teeter is its executive director, and she herself is quite familiar as a former city commissioner in Kalamazoo with these kinds of struggles and has moved into an advisory role of sorts for municipalities like Battle Creek and Kalamazoo, trying to sort these things out. And so over the next 6 months, we're going to spend a segment a month talking about these challenges and a number of the things that are going on to try and deal with them. Linda, good morning to you.
Good morning, Richard. I'm really glad to be here.
Well, we're glad to have you here. Let's start, if you don't mind, by talking about what Michigan Citizen Action is all about so folks are clear.
Sure. Michigan Citizen Action is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization, and we work on issues that make a difference in people's lives. And the state budget is certainly one of those. It impacts not only municipalities, but all of us every day.
Mm-hmm. So in your case, you're looking at the budget at the state level and its trickle-down effects everywhere else.
Absolutely.
Sounds like a big job.
Well, it's a process, and that's what I think we're going to try to do over the next 6 months, and I'm glad that we're able to do that, is to talk about the budget and the process and how people can make a difference in that.
So this is motivated by that which I referred to, I think, right? We're looking at tighter budgets now and trying to deal with the effects of that.
We have been looking at the state budget for many, many, many years. And, the budget really reflects the values and priorities of the state. So we've seen a time when the budget and dollars were lower, and we've seen a time now when the revenue is increasing somewhat from the state. The current budget is about $54.9 billion.
Mm-hmm. And all the cities and all the counties and all the entities like them across the state are all struggling for their share of it.
That's right. Yeah. Not only the municipalities, but you've got 24 budget areas within the state budget.
Mm-hmm.
So all of them are, looking for dollars and to make a difference in this state.
Does the squeaky wheel get the money? If you're one of those 24 areas and you have a louder voice, does that help?
Well, I think first of all, to just step back and talk about how it begins and how the budget process begins. It begins about 13 or 14 months before the budget year actually starts. And the state has a fiscal year from October 1st through September 30th. So our timing is perfect now because the budget behind the scenes is being developed. So each year, about August, the departments, all those 24 budget areas, are given some parameters.
Mm-hmm.
That's no different than when I was on the city commission or the city manager and the budget director for the city of Battle Creek or the townships or the counties are given some parameters within their budget. And then they begin to put together their budget areas, and then that's given to the budget director, and the governor then puts together his or her budget that gets presented to the legislature around the first part of February.
And the two chambers of the legislature, are working on their own versions. True?
So what happens is that the governor presents his or her budget, and then there's all of these bills that get introduced in the House and the Senate each year after the governor's address to the legislature, the joint appropriations committee. then yes, some of the bills are taken up in the House and some are taken up in the Senate, and then they obviously trade. Some of them end up in conference committee if they are not agreed upon. But I think that to make it simple for your listeners and for communities, it's a process. So once you know the process, you're able to make a difference.
It's like learning the dance steps.
It is. It is.
All right, we'll take a break and come back and talk about some of those in just a minute on WBCK. WBCK, Linda Teeter is here from Michigan Citizen Action. One of 6 monthly get-togethers we'll have to talk a little bit about budgets and how they come together and how you can be a part of that. And I guess that's the next natural step here is to say someone driving to work right now listening or sipping coffee this morning, Linda, and they're saying, okay, so what do I do about it?
Well, I think there are probably 2 or 3 things that the person who's at home having coffee or driving to work or hears this, after the broadcast,
Sure.
that once the budget is introduced, the bills are introduced in the House and the Senate, there are appropriation committee subcommittee. And it's good to know if any of your local legislators ours are on those the full appropriations committee and or what subcommittees they serve on. I think that's the best, always the best, to be in contact with your local legislator and be able to talk about what their work is. Some of them may be on appropriations. My state representative in Kalamazoo has been on the Appropriations Committee and then on several subcommittees. I think that's the best, number one, to be in contact with them. Any legislator who gets emails, calls over 10 is going to be paying attention to that. I think if you're really interested in the appropriations process, take some time to go to Lansing and actually learn about it and go to the committee hearings. That's not always feasible for people to do.
Right.
But also some of them are on either the Senate or House TV stations so that you can watch them online and pay attention to that. But I think that once you learn that process, there are documents that are put together that analyze the budgets that you can look at and learn about. And again, I think our goal here is not to make it complicated, but to simplify it for people.
Most people, if they have a budget issue, I presume, would be thinking of it from the point at which they sit. That is to say, my property taxes have gone up, my services are being cut, pardon me, and so is that what we should be telling our legislators? The stuff that's where the rubber is hitting the road?
Well, I think you first start with what the governor, him or her, puts out in their state of the state and their budget message, because that's been really the compilation of all of the departments who have been given some directive of what their budget parameters are. So I think that's the first spot every year, is to read that and understand it. And it's available online, and it's easy to understand those parameters. So I think that's where you start. Then the legislature in the House or the Senate are going to have their priorities. So what's happening at that level when those bills are introduced, and then to follow that process all the way through. The budget was adopted this year and signed on June the 8th. So you have about 6 months, the beginning of the year, to follow that process along.
And it has not been as dramatic as in previous years, where the House and the Senate and the governor are all struggling to agree, and we get to the deadline, and it gains more media attention when that happens. Of late, that hasn't been the case. They've been able to sort this out sooner, within months, and so maybe that doesn't bring as much drama and thus less coverage to it.
I think that's probably true. I would hope that through this series we would be engaging people, thinking about it, not only individuals, what's going to happen to our roads, what happens with public education, what happens with community colleges, higher education, but also what happens to municipalities, townships, cities, villages, and our roads are all very important. And how those dollars are appropriated makes a difference to the quality of life in all of our communities.
I'm going to come back to that in just a second. Linda Teeter is here from Michigan Citizen Action. Short break right now. Linda Teeter, a few more minutes here from Michigan Citizen Action. One of several interviews we're going to do over the next 6 months about budgets and how to deal with them and how to speak up if you have a concern about how the even state budget is done. I think the point here, Linda, is that folks in their everyday routines get caught up in those things or feel removed from these processes. And so you're here to say that's not true.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. We do get in our own worlds, but these are also kitchen table issues that I call them, that people talk about, whether it's Flint water that there was an appropriation this year to help with, but is it our roads? Is it environmental quality? Is it revenue sharing to communities who then we see of maybe our police and fire being, services being reduced, but so we do have a voice, whether we are the city of Battle Creek or a township or an individual or a neighborhood. We do have a voice.
And we are affected by that. Those examples you just cited couldn't be closer to us. I mean, those are 1 degree away from us sort of things.
Absolutely.
It's interesting you brought up the roads thing. Just last week we were talking with Tim Hill at Emmett Township, who twice in his township has floated a roads tax. Twice the voters have said, no, we're not going to do that. So he sat here and said, we're going to try to influence Lansing on this, and we're going to rally our state representatives to try and help us. Back to that whole squeaky wheel thing. Notion is townships should have a cut of that road money from the state. That's where he's coming from. Is that how this works? Is that successful as far as you've seen? People start getting active and loud and push, and maybe the money goes in a different direction?
Well, I think some of the most successful things that I've seen on a local level and at the state, if you go to the state capitol any day, there are groups that are there who are talking to legislators about their own particular issue. In this case, we're talking about township road money. That would probably be something that the Michigan Township Association would be also very successful at or supportive of. How do you do that? I think the most successful that I've seen are people who come together. They are not there for one day, but they are there over a period of time. And because legislators are now in term limits of 6 years in the House and 8 years in the Senate, I think the ones that I see are most successful are the groups that are trusted, the groups that are providing information, and they're there as a resource through the process, not for a day, not for a week, but over the long period of time that legislators can trust.
All right. So over the next several months, we'll have various folks with whom we'll speak, and we'll be sort of focused on these processes from a number of different angles. What do you hope folks will understand, if we just speak broadly for a moment, over these 6 interviews that we'll bring? What would you like them to get out of that?
I would hope that they're, number one, you can understand that you can make a difference in the process, whether it's the budget or anything else that impacts you. you need to be in it for a bit of time, not just I'm upset about this, but we're gonna learn, because the budget really is sort of the basis for lots of things that happen in our world. So to hear from not just me, but other people who've been part of it for years, who've been part of what happens at the federal level, which is way bigger, but the process is still the same, and that you can make a difference. That when you say, I don't like this, or this impacts me, but nobody listens, they'll listen. They will listen, but you need to be there for a period of time and be trusted.
All right. And so in December, we'll come back with another discussion in this regard. And it probably bears mentioning, you've been on the Kalamazoo City Commission in the past, but you work with the city and help advise them with these things. Battle Creek too, right?
I have, I would not categorize myself as in the advisory role. I've certainly had conversations with the city manager, but I know that the city manager here, Ms. Fleury, has really been looking at the whole issue of revenue sharing and how it's impacting not only Battle Creek, but other communities as well. They have great advisors, and certainly Michigan Municipal League is one of those that has been working on a state level about, for all cities, about the issue of revenue sharing and how some of that reduction has impacted, and certainly because it's a general fund revenue, right, then that's where it impacts police and fire, in Kalamazoo case public safety, because of the reduction in the general fund revenue.
I'm running out of time, but let me just ask you, what's your impression of this Foundation for Excellence idea in Kalamazoo?
Well, I served on a blue ribbon panel at the appointment of the city manager in Kalamazoo. I happen to think that it's been a gift for the city of Kalamazoo, and given us an opportunity to sort of breathe for a minute and look at, we cannot just have that without looking at the state budget and how revenue sharing and the reduction has impacted cities across the state. And we need to really address that issue.
It's not a collect the check and solved.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Well, we appreciate the help you're giving us to bring these folks forward and talk about this issue, so we'll look forward to that.
Thank you.
Linda Teeter, Michigan Citizen Action is the organization. You're online, right? Folks can look you up?
Yes, mishcitizenaction.org.
All right. Thank you.